priority-wise, trust in Jesus. If you haven't trusted in him, consider that. If you have trusted in him, consider your commitment, maybe a recommitment into following him. If we do so, he will guide you and direct you through life. Psalm 32:8 says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye. Similarly, the last half of Hebrews 13, verse 5, tells us, it quotes Deuteronomy 31:6, reminds us that God will never leave us or forsake us. So this evening, who do you put your trust in? Do you put it in people? People who can be fickle, who can leave you at the drop of a hat? Or do you put it in Jesus? Consider that this evening. He is the way, the truth, and the life, as John 14:6 tells us. And he loved you to the point of suffering and dying for you so that you could be redeemed. So I ask tonight, is there any assistance we can give you in your spiritual journey? Consider this, eternity. Eternity is a black and white issue. Eternity is locked in when your life is over, when your time is done on earth. The only way you can take care of that, to be with God, is to trust Jesus, believe in him, accept him, confirm your belief, and be baptized in his name. And we would hope that if someone's here tonight that hasn't done that, that you would consider that, so that you can start the new year without any fear or burden of what may come, because you'll know then, in the end, that you will be with God in eternity. So at this time, as we always do, we're going to offer the invitation. It's an invitation to become a child of God, or to renew your commitment to God. One dictionary definition of invitation is a request for someone's presence or participation. Don't think about that as our invitation. It's the Lord's invitation. It's an invitation from God to be forever in his presence. And I would ask, will you accept that invitation tonight? If you are one that likes to make New Year's resolutions, following Jesus and or strengthening your commitment to him would again be the best New Year's resolution you could make. It carries absolutely no regrets. So with that, if we can encourage you in any way, if we can help you in any way, if there's anything that you need this evening, we're about to sing a song of encouragement. We encourage you to come forward, make that be known if you have a need to do so. Let's stand as the invitation song is sung. Oh,
Good evening, everyone. Please open your Bibles to Genesis chapter 48. Genesis chapter 48. Wednesday book has a W on it. We start next Wednesday night. Sunday book has an S on it. We start Sunday morning. Sunday book, Wednesday book. Hey, it's a running gag. If you remember 3 months ago, we did the same thing. Sermon on the Mount begins Sunday morning. Brandon's going to be leading that. There are going to be different teachers on the Wednesday night and in the postcards book. So I would say it's potluck, but there is a plan. So Genesis, we're going to end Genesis tonight. When last we met, Jacob has come to Egypt. You remember God told Jacob it's okay to go to Egypt. What was going to happen? What did God promise Jacob would happen in Egypt? Do you recall? I know it's been a week ago and there's been a lot that's gone on between then and now. And you're looking forward to the crystal ball dropping tonight. What did God promise Jacob was going to happen when he went to Egypt? In Genesis chapter 1 and verse 28, God told Adam and Eve to do what? Be fruitful and multiply. Guess what's going to happen to Jacob's family in Egypt? They're going to be fruitful and multiply. He said this is what's going to happen here. So God is pronouncing blessings on Jacob and his family. He says, do what I tell you to do. You've been doing what I've told you to do. And all of a sudden you went from one guy to 70 people that's going down to Egypt. Now, about how long has the drought been going on? A couple years. How much longer is it going to last? 5 more. Is there any hope that they would survive if they stayed in Canaan? God provides. God provides. God is going to provide for Jacob and his people. Now, there's a problem inherent in him going to Egypt. What's the inherent problem? What's been the promise all the way back to chapter 12?
The land they were in was supposed to be theirs.
God promised them this land, and now we're leaving. Does God's plan always follow a path that we would consider logical? No. What's our job? Trust him. Do what he says. Even when it seems weird. Even when it seems off. You know, stuff like turn the other cheek. Because you're baptized after expressing faith, then all of your sins are forgiven. There are things, see, some of the things we get used to, some of the things we don't. Jacob, old man, is told, go. So the very first statement on lesson number 12, as has happened multiple times in Genesis, God reveals his blessings, the blessings of the fathers through and to the sons. Jacob has believed. He has believed in God and he has received numerous blessings. So what is the path? How are the blessings being handed down? From Abraham to Isaac, from Isaac to, from Jacob to, trick question here. Jacob to Joseph, because we're getting to Judah, but to Joseph, because as we get in here, what does Jacob claim regarding Joseph's sons that were born to him in Egypt? They're mine. Which is kind of weird. I mean, they were already, right? But it explains something, because by the time they get to Canaan, generations down the line, who all of a sudden has land? Ephraim and Manasseh. Were they one of the 12?
Nope.
No. But here is the beginning of some of the explanation of how this is going to work. And so Jacob says, these boys are mine. Now, be fruitful and multiply. You're going to be fruitful and you're going to multiply in Egypt. We did the math last Wednesday night. We're going to do the math again tonight. They go into Egypt with 70 people. They come out with almost 10,000 times that many people. That's a lot of people. Well, wait. No, it's more than that because that's just the men. That's just the men. So Jacob claims that they're mine in chapter 48 and in verse 5. And now your 2 sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh are mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. Now, I have a question about verse 6, and nobody can answer it. It says, and the children that you fathered after them shall be yours. Do we know about children after them? No, we don't. But you see, it's just one of those things when you read through here. I looked over at Cindy because she's all the time asking me questions I can't answer. I said, hey, Cindy, what do you think about this verse? And she just looked at me and grinned. I said, uh-huh. See? Now, but the point in all of this is Jacob claims Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, we always say Ephraim and Manasseh, but what was the birth order? Manasseh and Ephraim. You remember, so Jacob's getting up the last bit of his strength. He sets up in his bed, and Joseph comes in and bows himself before him. All right? So here's Joseph. And where is Ephraim and Manasseh? Where does he put his firstborn?
On his right.
He puts the firstborn on Jacob's right. So Jacob will touch him, right? So here's Manasseh. Here's Ephraim. Well, Jacob decides to play Twister and does one of these. And what does Joseph say?
Tries to smack his hands.
No. That's not how it works. And what does Jacob tell his boy?
I love that expression, Mark, in verse 19.
Go ahead, read it.
I know, my son, I know. He also will become a people, and he also will be great. However, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. I just love that. I know, son, I know. But God's ways are different.
So here again, because what birth order was Jacob? Second. God in his ways, he has a plan. Now, what has he promised to both of these two? Since you've already read it, you read through verse 20 of chapter 48, what has he promised to both of the sons? They're going to be great people. They're going to be a great number. You're going to have so many. But now the question is, compare and contrast Isaac's blessings of his 2 sons in Genesis 27 and Jacob with his 2, quote, sons, really his grandsons. So, what did Craig just read? When it comes to Ephraim and Manasseh, who's going to be the greater? Ephraim. Because that's the choice. There's no other explanation than that's the choice. God chose it, Jacob followed it, that's how it is. Now, what happened in chapter 27? There's a difference here. It's not just the younger over the older. What else does it say about Jacob and Esau? You remember? The older shall serve the younger. There's a difference there. Manasseh's not going to serve Ephraim, but here, if in the choosing, God chooses Ephraim, and Jacob chooses Ephraim, and that's how it's going to be. Now, when it comes to Jacob and Esau, and we talked about this last Wednesday, and we're going to probably talk about it even more later tonight. If it were left up to Isaac and Isaac alone, who would he have chosen? Esau. Why? Because he's a firstborn. What was God's will? And what ended up happening? Who did God choose? Jacob. Now, from the womb. But how did all that work? Weird. Just weird. Because Jacob, I don't know if it was deceitful when Esau came in hungry and he gave away his birthright for food, but then he detested it. And then later on, what Rebekah did, and then what Jacob did with the goat skin and all that stuff. But God's ways are going to work out. That's the point. Trying to say, well, that's not fair, that's not right. What kind of person did Esau end up becoming? Who did he marry? Red flag, red flag, red flag, siren going off. He married Canaanite women, he married Ishmaelite women, he married all the wrong women. And why did God get Moses to put that in there? What's going to happen, Israel, if you marry Canaanite women? There's trouble, 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 trouble. So that's Esau, and the Hebrew writer called him what? This is a little bit of a review since this is the last class. What did the Hebrew writer call Esau?
Profane.
Profane. What does that mean? I mean, he went around cussing all the time? No. What does it mean? What type of person was he?
Vulgar, disrespectful.
Worldly, vulgar. And he chose Jacob. So in 48:22, Jacob blesses Joseph above his brothers. How specifically?
We got an extra portion, as it says in verse 22.
Right. He gave him a specific piece of land. When is the next time we figure out what land is given to who? Joshua. Add up the generations. That's a long time. But here is specifically, this is going to be yours. And why was it his? Because it was special to Jacob. Because how did Jacob end up getting it? He fought for it with my sword and my bow. So why is it important when we get to chapter 49? And if you have questions, I hope you'll bear with me once we get to chapter 49. Why is it important for the wandering Jews to hear about these blessings on these sons, on all of the sons?
Through the judges, they were told that God would bless them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It'll definitely provide context for them in understanding how things go the way they go once they come into the land, as far as the land separation, about where they settle. I mean, all these things, are really contained in this chapter for them to get the sense and the understanding.
This is the plan. The plan is unfolding. The plan has unfolded by the time folks start reading this for the first time. The plan has unfolded, and it's unfolded through the generations, and even through some of the generations that some of the Israelites maybe think God had forgotten. But here is the work, here is the plan, it's continuing, and what has shown up? I'm coming, Keith. What has shown up all the way through Genesis? What has showed up all along this line? What's God always doing? He's always keeping his promises. Always. Keith, sorry.
Genesis, when you study Genesis, I think we forget who's doing the choosing. All the things that happened didn't matter. God chose. And when further down the line, when we see the character of the different Jacob and Esau, and we see Ephraim and that, there's a reason why God chose, because God knows the heart of these men, and he knows what his plan is,
Yep.
and he knows who will carry it out and who won't. And as strange as it seems, it always.
It always
is. Because God has one of the things that I always appreciate about Genesis, it shows that God didn't do anything without a purpose. There was a purpose behind everything he chose to do. And while I may not understand it, I just go back, I guess, to Genesis. I just trust him. It's going to come out the way he wanted it to. And all the help, it's not going to change
Right.
it.
And it's not contingent upon us helping him out.
Right.
That goes all the way back. Our responsibility is to do the right thing, do the next right thing. And he's got his plan, and that's how it's supposed to continue. So I ask you to research as best as you can the explanation of some of these blessings, quote unquote blessings, on Jacob's sons. Now, Reuben is the firstborn. So normally what happens to the firstborn? The firstborn son.
It's a double portion.
Supposed to get a double portion. Except, Jacob says right off the bat, nope. Why? What does it mean when you went to my couch?
Fornication with Bethlehem.
He went into Bilhah. Jacob's a handmaiden of his wife, that he had children. And he says, you're not going to get it. You will not have preeminence. That's normally what happens with the firstborn son. You have the preeminence. And it says that he had high expectations. The first fruit of my strength, preeminent in dignity, preeminent in power, except verse 4, you're as unstable as water and you will not have preeminence because you went up to your father's bed and defiled it. So you ain't getting it. Next comes Simeon and Levi.
Mark, another thing about that whole scenario is one commentary I read, made the point that no one from that lineage ever was placed as a judge or prophet or had any active role of deliverance within Israelites' history. Just a point.
So who's the next born? Simeon, and then Levi. And what were their problems?
But they're the one that Tamar and Shechem.
They went in after Shechem, and they murdered people. Weapons of violence.
Set them up to fail, and then
So when you think about Simeon and Levi, and you think about the land, how much land they get? Simeon gets absorbed, and Levi has the cities, and they don't. And along comes Judah. Judah has this long paragraph. Judah is the next born and given the blessing. Now it's interesting that the blessings are divided because Abraham to Isaac, birthright and blessing. Isaac to Jacob, birthright and blessing. Jacob to Joseph, double portion. Jacob to Judah, there's the blessing. I think that's interesting. But here we have Judah. Judah's no pristine person, but here comes the blessing. Now, we get to look back. Peter says, we have the prophetic word made more sure. We look back and say, well, of course, that's how it worked out. There's a lot that was going on, but what will not depart from Judah? The scepter.
This is messianic, right?
Of course.
amen.
It's prophetic both about David and Jesus, which is why why it all stacks up later on. Which is why Matthew and Luke spend so much time connecting Jesus back to Judah. Because that's the kingly line. Zebulun, you're going to get some beachfront property. Look how short that is. And Issachar. Okay, all I read about Issachar was a stretch. Sometimes commentaries can be very helpful. Other times in commentaries you go, How do you know that? What in the world went on? Does anybody have any bright ideas about Issachar?
One of the commentaries I read talked about even though they were strong, they were lazy. They weren't effective.
I read that too,
What
and I
they
was
were
just like,
supposed to be doing. And so when you look at, he bowed his shoulder to bear burdens. I mean, he didn't, he just curtailed and
Right.
cowered instead of, asserting.
right. Now it's interesting, beginning next with Dan. Dan is a play on the name Judge. There are high expectations. What's interesting is the next few, Dan and Gad and Asher, seem to be, the name means something. I don't know about the others. Gad is a play on his name, and historically, they were attacked many times because of where they were. But also, there were fierce fighters. Asher was given an abundant land. Asher means fortunate. Anybody else have any more about those three? Naphtali. Again, from my vantage point, all I read was a stretch. I have.
What's interesting, the connection with Naphtali is, and you go to Judges, as Barak was from Kadesh Naphtali, being the spokesperson that Deborah went to get that. And of course, he and Deborah in Judges 5 have the song.
Mm-hmm.
So again, leading into that eloquence, that he's given the blessing on beautiful words in verse 21.
Joseph. This time, Joseph and Judah are given a lot more ink. A double portion in the last chapter, verse 23. Or verse 22, Joseph is a fruitful bough in a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers bitterly attacked him, shot at him, and harassed him severely. He's talking about what has happened in Joseph's life. In Joseph's life, it seemed like he got the focus of the enemy. And how did it end up? Verse 24, it didn't get it.
If it wasn't for Joseph's wisdom and all that, they never would have survived. And them being able to just come out of there to be a nation was because, providence of God, Joseph just didn't happen to have these dreams, As he said, God is just it's always going to work out the way he wants it to, but we have no clue how that's going to be.
Well, and he mentions that in verse 25. The God of your father. How he got through all of this was by the working of God. Blessings upon blessings. And Benjamin. Anybody want to mess with the Benjamins? With the Benjaminites? Interestingly enough, in the Judges, Benjamin is not really the most profound tribe. But in Judges 3, Judges 5, Judges 20, 1 Samuel 9, and even Paul himself comes from the tribe of Benjamin. It's like, don't mess with them. Because once you get to Judges, they're a bunch of left-handed stone throwers and, they pick you off. But here is this ravenous wolf. So we have these 12 names, these 12 tribes, these 12 men. Now, if you're Naphtali, how are you feeling when Judah and Joseph seem to be getting all the ink? Remember one of the tests that Joseph put the brothers through when it came to Benjamin. How much extra food did Benjamin get? Double portion. Is there a lesson in it for us? Have you ever been jealous of somebody else because of what was given to them or what they had or their natural gifts and talent, beauty, riches, opportunities? What are you supposed to do with that? Feel. Naphtali. What are you supposed to do with that? What happens with jealousy and envy? Where does it end? Where did it end in the story? What ended up happening?
God's plan was fulfilled.
Any of you remember what Shakespeare called envy? I know this isn't the Shakespearean literature class. Called it a green-eyed monster. People turn into monsters when they're that envious and that jealous. They try to kill people because it's not fair. It should be mine. But for believers, God's choosing is God's choosing. If you're the 2-talent man, are you jealous of the 5-talent man? Better not be. But
When we get to, when he dies, they all go. And that would tell me that they have some matter of respect that they weren't angry because all of the brothers go.
yes. But in all of this, what is this lesson? But we'll get there. But I'm bringing this out because we still deal with the same sorts of issues today that these people are dealing with. And the wisdom that we need to have, and not just looking back and judging them and critiquing them, that's really not the point of the lesson or the narrative. The point of the lesson is we need to learn the lessons that we see in here. And so if somebody gets a 5-fold portion more than we do, we don't treat them like it's their fault. God chooses whom he chooses into the ways that he chooses and the people and the situations. Some folks have a horrible life. Some folks are blessed beyond. And what we're supposed to do is be faithful. Because this is the story of faithfulness. What promise, let's get through the lessons because I've got a review I'd like to talk with you about. What promise does Jacob extract from his sons?
Take his bones back.
Where?
Gave him
Who's buried there? Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and Leah. Not Rachel. Now, when Jacob dies, do you find this interesting? How long did they mourn him in Egypt? 70 days. They embalm him for 40. And then for 30 more after he's done, they're mourning him still. And then Joseph requests from Pharaoh, my dad made me promise that I'd take him back home and bury him. Is that all right? And what does Pharaoh do for Joseph? Could you imagine that entourage? Who all went? First of all, the whole family ran the first hearse, or the first limousine. But who else was going?
the nobles of Egypt.
All of the nobles of Egypt, a massive army, horsemen. Now, they come up, they come up out of Egypt and they get to the other side of the Jordan. And what happens on the other side of the Jordan before they cross over into Canaan? They mourn for 7 more days. And so what's everybody thinking? Dude, this must be an important guy. This must be somebody really important. So they bury him and they come back. And once again, fear creeps into the hearts of those who have been guilty in the past. And what do they think?
He's going to pay him back.
Dad's gone. There's nothing keeping Joseph from getting us. Why? Why would that even enter their brain?
Because of their guilt.
Because of what they did to him. Makes me think if they had the opportunity, they might do this very thing.
That's one thing that's incredible about the nature of sin, and how it just absolutely blinds and distorts. Because what all has Joseph done already to his acceptance of them during the famine, and that heartfelt scene that we all hopefully can cry at, when he has to turn away because he doesn't want to see the Egyptians see his response. Everything that he's done for that time and he's still doing, but yet what does their mind go to?
And when they go ask him in verse 17, what does it do to Joseph?
Tears him up again.
Joseph wept when they spoke to him. And why did he weep?
This is my place of God.
You don't have anything to be afraid of. I told. He's exasperated with this because he wants to do good to them. He doesn't want to repay them evil for evil. He wants to give them good. Let's read. Keep Chairman.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. They told him that what their father said.
Yeah, he told you to forgive us.
Yeah, he had already done that.
Right.
Yeah. But you know that, I've always read this, it was the guilt that was in him. They knew they deserved it.
Sure.
They didn't deserve what he had done.
Sure.
And they just thought, this gravy train's gonna run out.
There are some people who just have a hard time with grace, accepting it. And maybe that's because it really is unnatural to them.
You know, Mark, one of the most powerful lessons to me in this whole thing about Joseph is most people just look through things from their own perspective. And there's so much learning that's going on. Joseph beforehand, let me tell you, he remembered everything. So much so, it's just so powerful. He sat them down at that table by age. So you knew, and he was so protective of Benjamin. And I've always wondered,
On purpose.
did you notice Reuben didn't do what he should have as the oldest? But Judah put his life on the line. And then those two get the most blessings, and I think it's because they thought of others more than themselves. Soon as Joseph, when he cried in front of him and said, he realized, God put me here. And I don't think he did until that moment. But from that moment on, of course he couldn't be upset with them because he knew that God had worked, somehow God, this whole thing, we can't see the future. But boy, I mean, it's so hard to not let things affect you because God sees the future and you don't.
So let's pick up in 18. Joseph wept, verse 18. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. But Joseph says, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Now, who are the many people that are alive because of Joseph?
Not only the Israelites.
The whole country of Egypt is alive because of Joseph. Well, it's because of God. God using Joseph. And he's just like, look, this is God's work. And the fact that we're alive and thriving and are going to thrive and are going to go out of this land eventually and take over Canaan, this is the working of God. Do not fear. Verse 21. What's Mark's Bible class point number 3? Anytime the Bible says do not fear, people are afraid. Don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. He comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Now me, I've probably gone, how many times do I have to tell you? That would be my fault. But he was exasperated, wasn't he? And it bothered him. What does Joseph ask at the end of chapter 50?
Take his bones out with him.
I want to be buried with my people. I'm in Egypt. You may see the headdress and the clothes and the wife's name and all of that, but he says, I'm not Egyptian. I'm an Israelite. And I want to be buried with my people. So what confidence does that give the people who are wandering the wilderness? They're going back home. This is God's plan. This is how it's always worked. So, quick summary before we actually get to the review questions on the last page. All through Genesis. Genesis is a story of God blessing and rolling out these blessings. So if you go all the way back to the beginning, who carried the blessing from Adam and Eve? Who's next in line? Seth. Firstborn? No. Abraham. This is kind of a curveball question. Was Abraham the firstborn of Terah? Nope. Isaac, firstborn? Nope. Jacob, firstborn? Judah or Joseph, firstborn? Nope. All of these, Seth and Isaac and Jacob and Judah, all carried the messianic line. All four of them weren't the firstborn. One of the lessons might be, this isn't a worldly plan. This is a plan of God. It's God's own choosing, God's own planning. And if it seems upside down to you, get over it. Trust in God and in His ways. It even included Leah. If you go back to chapter 29, she was the one who mentioned God. Who did Jacob's favorite? What did Jacob's favorite do? Remember what she did as she was leaving the house? Stole the idols. Were idols an issue for the rest of the time? Even Joshua says, put away the idols from the other side of the river. Wonder where they got them. But Leah was the one, and guess who's born in the family plot? Or buried in the family plot? Leah. The one who wasn't as pretty, and the one Jacob didn't even choose first, but God chose him. It's almost as if there are some lessons here for us. If you could summarize Genesis' message, how would you do it? Leo.
God always keeps His promises.
Always. Always. But what do we also know about Him keeping those promises?
It's on His terms.
On His terms and on His time. Is that ever frustrating? Was it ever frustrating in the book? Pretty much the whole book, right? Pretty much the whole book. There was frustration in dealing with the plan, and I mean, that jumps off the page. A point that we've made earlier tonight, I think Keith brought it up the first time when we were talking about Abraham and Sarah. Does God need our help to work out the plan? What's the plan, Abraham? Do what I tell you to do. And what did God promise Abraham? Why is Abraham such an integral part of the gospel and the story of the Bible?
Because through him all the nations of the earth.
God made a promise. And God made a promise, and Abraham was faithful, and look what ended up happening. God saved the world through Abraham.
Which goes back to Genesis 3.
All the way back to Genesis 3. Genesis 3, Genesis 12, Genesis 15. All these are important points. And then there's a little microcosm in here with Joseph, right? God saves the world through Abraham's great-grandson. Because what was going to happen in Egypt and Canaan without Joseph? Here is God's grace being poured out on people. And then what happens a lot of times with God's grace? Exodus chapters 1, 2, and 3.
Forgotten. That was one of the underlying things about Genesis is Egypt became a power because of Joseph and his wisdom. Because when the money ran out, he bought the land and then he bought them. And who got rich? And powerful, Pharaoh.
Pharaoh did. And what almost always ends up happening with the guys and gals when they get all the money in the world and all the power in the world, even before Lord of the Rings taught us this lesson, broken, corrupted people are tempted, and a lot of times they choose the easy, fast, self-aggrandizing way out. So much so that you forget who saved you. And Egypt forgot. What's the message of Genesis to us? That could have been the message to the wandering Israelites. What's the message to us?
Kind of like Isaiah 55. God's ways are hard. He does things in his own way. We're not always going to understand. And nor do I think he expects us to.
But he expects us to trust him.
Right.
Because who's he working for? See, a lot of times we think about our worship to him and we have to do this, and we have to do this. All the way back to the Garden of Eden. What did God want to do with Adam and Eve?
Have fellowship with him.
Partner with them, have fellowship with them, because in that was paradise. When God and humanity were together, partnering, God provides, man uses the provisions to glorify God. There's this beautiful, beautiful idea of what partnering with God can look like in a human life. So much so that our cup can run over if we'll see it and if we'll yield to it. So much so that what happens to the barren? Speaking of Isaiah, what were the barren supposed to do with the corners of their tents? Enlarge them. Why? Because the children of the barren are more than the children. And he says, look at the blessings that I'm going to heap out on you. How long did Abraham have to wait? Forever. How long does Jacob have to wait? Does Jacob see the blessings? Who's going to see the blessings? Well, sadly, it's Joshua's generation. And what do they see? A land full of milk and honey that God provides for them, where they can be fruitful and multiply. God's provisions, God's working, God's promises, all the way from beginning. And Paul tells us in Ephesians 3, before the beginning. This was according to the eternal purpose which God accomplished. And who is this for? Us. It was for them, but it's also for us. That's the whole point. Next Wednesday, we're going to start the postcards class. The quarter after that, we're going to travel. We're traveling from Egypt to Canaan in our Bible classes. This is going to be, it's not going to be a book. Bless your heart. Mark's going to put it together. But that's what we're going to do next time. We're going to, a lot of the time on Wednesday nights, we're going to do Old Testament, New Testament, Old Testament, New Testament, because we want to get the breadth here. But we're going to put on our walking shoes in 3 months and see how far it takes us. Hopefully, they won't wear out. See what I did there? Before we end, and I know we're past time, let's have a prayer. Father, as we come to the end of this class and as we come to the end of this calendar year, we thank you for reminding us of how wonderful you are, about your plans and what you've done for people of old and what you have in store for us. Blessings beyond our wildest dreams. Help us work our way through the deserts and the floods of our lives, and help us to trust you like Abraham did. Help us to trust you like the people of old and of faith did, and help us to yield to your will. We love you and thank you, especially for Jesus. In his name, amen.